Hi, my name is Jere Pfister, and I'm going to read some old poetry that I've written on childhood and marriage. I've been married 61 years to the same old guy, so there've been a lot of evolutions. So let's start. This one's fairly new. I haven't read it many places. I call it the contract. What do you do when you grow old, no longer able to travel? I remember the midst of our drive through a green forest on the way to the Pacific. No other cars. My concentration slips from the road to what lies ahead. I had not yet learned to set my watch to the town clock at precisely noon each day as to regulate my yearnings for the goal, the publishing before the crafting, burial before the slow death, the beach before the end of the road. Without warning, a giant stag leaps in front of, over the car, and my awe to keep control as my body awakes to his leap, his antlers like North Country crown. I am swept into the presence of the king of the forest. I am caught in the arms of the quiet man. I have watched and followed as we finish one play, and then the last play of the summer. I graduated from high school. He suddenly swallows me with his kiss, breath, touch, on the steps of a house in the French Quarter under a full August moon, sweaty with humidity as lust and want for recast our separate plans for life. Law school for him, and New York an actor's studio for me. We become adversarial advocates as he dictates his case notes to me, and unable to stop myself, I read the case law of a wife's sexual duty to her husband's desire, outraged and scornful of the man, even a judge's opinion. I point out the ignorance, the arrogance, as I, a mere woman of 20, a wife of 1 year, declare that law wrong, unconstitutional, that in our bed, any bed, mutual desire, physical ability would meet the rule of law, not force. Sitting in an alcove, knee to knee of the public library, listening to a man with no home tell me of his life on the streets as he pulls a knife from his back belt. This is how I protect myself. He wants me to react. He wants my fear. I know fear when my love of 60 years enters shape-shifting time warps, believes we are in some unhappy past moment, some hurt, some other outrage that I'm his mother, forcing him to eat his cream of wheat. As he looks at me with such hate, I remember his erection, stretching with his whole body like an enchanted prince from Grimm, and slowly wooing my prince back to the now with a kiss. I am safe for another day. I'll switch to my mother. Making the common mistake of naming my first image of God, Mama, I try to please her and still be me. I'll go back to my husband. This began to happen years ago. Variations on an old love song. He can no longer find me across a crowded room. I watch him panic, fearing that I have left him. I call out, but he cannot hear me. I walk toward him. He moves away, winding his way through strangers. I stalk him, reach out gently. I touch him. Here I am. Recognition. Where were you? I see this old man walking aimlessly through the parking lot. And then I recognize the stoop of his shoulders and head. My husband has lost his car. I see it parked across from Goodwill, where he searches for romances. I pull next to him. Are you stalking me, woman? I'm a happily married man. Sometimes, I say. A smile fills his eyes. He still recognizes a joke. Recurring shame. I have been a curious person since childhood, seeing simile, desperate beliefs ignored, how we need each other even in our distrust, as we learn to justify our parents' prejudices, overcoming their hates if we are lucky enough to see the fallacy of both our arguments. For after all, the true duty of a child is to ask, why? Why do you hate your neighbor so? Why is teaching a lesson an important duty if it inflicts pain on another, even as we cry over the suffering of Jesus and say he died for our sins, if we cannot learn to love those we hate? Or is your shame for your adoration of a Jew, a swarthy man of color you could not find in death? The eye of the developer. Will you look at that? What do you call it again? Oh, yeah, a prairie. It looks like a valley to me. Well, what's the difference? Are you sure? You grow food on one and buffalo and cattle live on the other? I don't see any cows or cornfields. Well, it doesn't matter because what I see is beautiful and I see a major golf course. Can't you see it? We'll build a resort on that red hill over there and the guest can look out over the prairie, right? What do you mean it's protected land? By who is it protected? I have never been stopped by the United States government. Got it? Now find me the person who can turn it over to me. Is that all? Well, I guess I'll have to run for president.
My first poem is entitled Winds. It is pleasing to sit in the shade these days, watching the branches move back and forth and up and down, swirling round and round. The smaller branches moving more freely, changing directions as needed to endure the winds of life. The larger branches, having endured similar winds, are now more tranquil. There is daylight. My next poem is Except When One Color Blends into Another. looking through gray lens for a particular shade, which no prescription can clear? Are your colors vividly light or boldly dark? Or maybe they're somewhat obscure. Has life's rays changed your colors into a blur? How about your red rose? Is it still bright for love, or has your red rose turned its brightness to even lust or perhaps hate? And what about this rose's stem? Is it green and firm, or has it turned to a yellowish shade of fear about the uncertainties of this year? What shade are your colors? Have they turned into a blur, looking through gray lens? My next poem, Nowadays. I feel like that slave child being pulled away from her mother. I can now understand the pain of longing to be held. I thought years of litigation, years of civil disobedience, and years of suffering would have brought about a change for me just to simply to be held. But instead, more excuses, more. My next poem, Seek. Left behind, not sure if I'm ready to catch up. Standing over the headstone, wondering where I will end up. Should I run to the end? Should I walk his walk and have his life and have his faith? I'm left behind, not ready to catch up. My pace is slow. As I count, one more, go. My next poem, Keys. They fall. Do I pull them up? They are in flooded, dirty water. Do I hide or do I seek? Or do I let them drown? No, the spiritual water of faith, simmered in sweat, brought to a boil, brews love. Please, oh please, may I have my keys?
I'm Brooke Summers-Perry. I don't avoid my children's pain. I sit with it. A 4-year-old's protest, an explosion of unprocessed feelings, a son's realization that changes carefully cultivated friendships, a teen's inability to see the point of any of it. I sit still. The pain catches up to me. I sit still to know the mystery of love within. I resist the urge to make it my tantrum, make it my acceptance, make it my depression. I say, go ahead, kick and scream, but not at me. Go ahead, grieve the loss of who your friends want you to be. Go ahead, mourn the absence of the light you cannot see. You do not choose these. Pain chooses you. Ignored pain magnifies. Ask me how I know. I meet you in the moment. I do not cower. I do not take it from you. I do not live through it for you. I focus on my love for you. I focus on my faith in you. We do not deny, distract, or dismiss. I witness. I hold. I breathe. I love. I stand under. I sit beside. I watch you fall. Tears and tissues cascade. Last rush of grief releases, shoulders drop, belly softens. A grief finally released. The smaller self destroyed, I watch you rise.
Last to find myself.
lost in a sea of opportunities that look like a parade of all the ways I don't belong in the family trilogy. Not a prodigy nor point of pride, not the first, the booming voice that moves the masses, not the next, the off-road racing Hall of Famer, the last, not more than a spectator. I chase after my one thing, sprint down many paths, wear a million hats, quickly when each exploration discovers who I'm not. Decades of chasing it shows me nothing, slows my chasing, more somebodies I'm not. Defeated, I stop. Standing still in my nothing, I hear my heart, see myself. One who'd rather see what matters than be what matters. I feel a rush. More than a child standing back to back, I outgrow the shade, I show up. Loving spectator, curious explorer, attentive observer, full of courage, I see brilliantly clear. Everyone, everywhere, loving, inspired witness, me. Under the mask. I want to drop the mask of uncertainty, reject the fear that I need to ingest someone else's formula. I want to leave behind the doubt, the idea I need a roadmap, an example to follow, a successful model, someone else's design. I long to be free of the performative model, the checks and balances, the ROIs, the benchmarks, quotas, checkpoints, and goals. I don't want to run the numbers, do projections, make assumptions. I want to be with, put one foot in front of the other, beside another. I want to navigate and balance, accept the unsteadiness of the path, arm in another's. I want to be alive with what is under the mask. The creek. The weekly sleepover question comes up at a Friday cheerleading practice. I volunteer to host. There are open mouths and wide eyes, then stuttering, I'll ask my mom. Yeah, we'll call you later. When I get home, the calls pour in, mom's stuttering. I learned that moms don't let their daughters attend sleepovers with cheerleaders who live in barns. Rejected, I storm down the hill and hurl a kayak into Wilbur Creek. Rage fuels my paddle that slaps the water and makes turtles jump from their logs and birds fly from their nests. My unskilled, angry rhythm leaves a wave of zigzagging bubbles behind me. A mile later, my arms are shaking, exhausted. I rest the long paddle across my lap and float around the last bend in the creek. Before me, the Ohio River stretches out. It's wide. Wild rush of brown water pulls me closer at a quickening pace. A heavy metal barge appears at the edge of my view. My awe is eclipsed by the danger. I sweep my paddle up and across in a panicking full-body circles, digging deeper and deeper on my left until I square up evenly between the two banks of the creek, my back to the river. I paddle deliberately, placing myself safely around the first bend, nestling myself in the peace of the creek. Now I can see all that I missed. The lush undergrowth, the vines that sway in the breeze, individual leaves whipping and waving. I notice the shoreline shape where droughts and floods have left oversized S's, abandoning shores and drying up docks. Now gliding smoothly across the surface, my strokes in rhythm with the hills that reach up to the shore and recede back across flat fields. I recognize my field, my rope swing, my landing. The water patters gently underneath the vessel. I make eye contact with the turtle family now back up on their log. I look up to the nest where birds are resting and chirping. I coast up to the shore, pull the kayak up the slope, turn it over on land and walk back uphill to the barn. Tornado. Sitting on top of a picnic table, she pulls the hemmed edge of her gym shorts along her muscular thighs toward her knees.
not to become more modest, but to stop the ticklish prickling of the splinters curving up from the weathered wood. She looks across the mercury surface of the pond. The fish aren't biting. The field between the pond's far edge and the woods shifts rapidly from Prussian blue to smoky yellow. The pressure drops fast. Her ears pop. There's a little time to heed the warning. She lifts her feet and pivots away from the wooded edge of the pond to face the clearing on her right. Her eyes widen to take in the intensity of the horizon. Clear cobalt expands above a band of charred clouds that rest heavily on a green glow of a disturbed atmosphere. Cool air and hot air dance in black swirls that suddenly drop from the bottom of a cloud line. Like strands of hair being whipped into a braid, the earth pulls them to the ground. They zip across the pasture. Split rail fences and rusted metal sheets spiral upward, thickening the braid. Energized by fear, she leaps from the table. She sprints up the rolling hill, running as fast as she can. Her mind darts through the wall of the house and into the scene at the dining room table. She hears the laughter, the clanking of dishes. Her children and her parents are as oblivious to the whirling debris outside as they are to the weight of their burdens that caused her to storm out an hour earlier. They laugh as they use rote motions to set the Sunday supper on the table. Still running toward the house to warn them and corral them into the cellar, her mind zooms back to her own body. She feels gravity lose its grip. Still in motion, her legs slow their gait. Their effort is lost to their weightlessness. As each muscle gives way to the ease of flight, her heart follows. Her mind is the last to release the weight of the dread. As her jaw relaxes, a tender smile forms. Now in full flight, she turns toward the wind. Like the tool that used to gracefully arc and flow when she leapt as a child, she rolls on the invisible waves, in tune, at peace. Without a worry, she flies.
Walk with me, a meditation. Walk with me into the labyrinth and surrender yourself to an ancient mystery, a wonder, a joy. Walk with me and take one footfall after another, minding nothing but the path, twisted circuits of tight turns, narrowly defined. Walk with me into the labyrinth and discover for yourself the surprising stretches, trajectories, irresistible ellipses that pull you inescapably to your own heart. Walk with me and trust in angels, guardians, sentries of the sacred, who reveal themselves only by their soft breath on your soul, who keep the way perfectly. Walk with me into the labyrinth and set your own pace, gliding, striding, dancing the revolutions with no discernible partner. Walk with me and listen to the silence deep within. Discover the cadence beating like a heart just beneath your feet. Walk with me into the labyrinth and stand in the antechamber of eternity, where, for a moment, you may be moved beyond all expectation. Walk with me and renounce your anticipation. Be mindful, be content to receive nothing at all. Open yourself to every possibility. Walk with me into the labyrinth and seek the flower that blooms within, unfolding beauty in a garden watered by faith and hope, by the audacity of life itself. Walk with me and go backward to go forward, recognizing that life is a single path from beginning to end, no matter how many turns you take or how often you step aside. Walk with me into the labyrinth and become one among many, like the cells of your body, at once uniquely purposeful and insignificant. Walk with me and meditate, or weep, or laugh aloud. Feel whatever asks to be acknowledged, Let your emotions take you by the hand and lead you home. Walk with me into the labyrinth, and we will find ourselves outside again, hearts wide open, breathless as the newly born, alive.
Hello, my name is Patricia Flaherty Pagan, and I'm a poet and short story writer. I hail from Boston and have lived abroad in Asia, but currently I live in Houston, Texas, and I'm a proud member of WiVLA. I write about murder, myth, and motherhood in multiple genres, so I'm going to share a poem from each of those focuses. So first, related to murder, I'll be reading Ferris Wheel from Hair-Raising Tales of Villainous Confessions, edited by Melissa Allgood and Chantel Renee, and it was inspired by a murderous look at a real disaster in Boston in which a Ferris wheel broke and people were stranded. So, Ferris wheel. From 300 free-falling feet up, I hear your screams as your screaming mouth crashes down, down, down. I hear and feel the creak and whoosh of the frail swinging car, my gasp and our fortunate disaster. The smell of Jameson is still on your clothes. Purple and black bruises fade around my eyes. Your penitence in the car after. Terror, cigar-burned opportunity, my instinct as the bodies veer and winds lick, shift, propel. 2 hands, arms, and adrenaline react. Push. The newsprint documents the historic calamity. The owner stumbling, ducking, pointing blame away from the carnival. My smile tremors behind quick summoned tears for the officers. But from 300 free-falling feet up, your screams from your screaming mouth crash down, down, down. My next poem, now that we've covered murder, we're moving on to myth. And this poem was inspired by a year I spent on Gojedo in Korea. And you may remember the Furies from your mythology. They are also featured in this poem. Fairy Woman of Gojedo. Tiny Furies, ankle grabbers on the gray pebble beach, climbing, lying in wait in the pocket of a snug black parka. Tree Street is Sunday morning silent. Daiso's doors gape open. Plush yellow smiley face pillows in the store window. Peep yellow as they beckon from the corner. Consume me. 3 sets of knife-edged canines sink into my soft middle. I'm a fairy woman to carry, not to judge. I catch snatches of Norwegian, French, English, Busan slang. The blades of carrot peelers glint, treasures for 2,000 won. Megara hisses at her fury sisters. I bump shoulders with their prey. A gaunt, blue-eyed engineer by the shiny elevator doors, and then the bitter sisters alight. Rubbing a smooth red hair ribbon, wrapping my expatriate solitude around me, a nubby scarf. I hear her screams as they attack. They are fluent in vengeance. Thank you. And on a lighter note, a poem about motherhood from the book In the Questions, Poetry by and About Strong Women, which I co-edited for Spider Road Press. In the Questions is available from Spider Road Press and on Amazon. And this poem is called 11 O'Clock Woman. 11 o'clock woman. Nubby towels rest across her forearm. Unwritten clauses thrum in her fingertips. Her sagging shoulders insist, but today holds enough. Thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more about my poetry and short stories, please visit my website at patriciaflahertypagan.com. I will be part of Write Fest, an exciting festival at Write Space Houston, coming up later this spring. And you can learn more about that and other events by following me on Instagram at Patricia Flaherty Pagan Author or on Twitter at PFWriteWrite. Happy Poetry Month!
Hello, my name is Beatrice Stewart. I'm a poet and author. I'm going to read several poems from my last book, Poetry During the Trump Years, which can be found at Amazon.com. Mother's Day is coming up, and so this poem has to do with mothers. Mother prayed. I have been praying a lot these past 3.5 years. And when I pray in the old way, the way my mother and grandmothers prayed, I see my mother praying and see her thinking of her mother praying, connecting us mothers one to the other without end. Mothers across the world are forming the horizontal arm of the cross as they pray for all humanity. Mothers across the world are forming the vertical arms of the cross and send it up as their prayer of gratitude and goodwill in hopes of a better world. We thank you, mothers. Mothers praying for the health and well-being of their children and loved ones, for the betterment of life for all, for freedom, justice, liberty, and equality. These days, I too pray as a mother. I pray thinking of my mother on her bending knees, hands clasped in supplication, head bowed in humility. Mother prayed for me, that I might have a better life than she, that the world would be a better place for me, free of the stings of racism and hostilities. Mother prayed for me. We thank you, mothers. During these Trump years and the COVID-19 pandemic, as a mother, I too pray for the safety of my child and grandchildren and all the generations which follow after, that they might have at least as much freedom as me. Mothers prayed. We thank you, mothers, for all the prayers you prayed for us. Black folks. Black folks, remember this. Once upon a time, it was forbidden for you to learn to read and write, punishable by death, or anyone who taught you. Yet you have overcome that stumbling block. Black folks, don't you wonder why those in power labeled you less than domestic animals, subhuman, lacking in the ability to learn? Are your domestic animals interested in worldly knowledge? Do they yearn to read and write? Have they learned to speak any human language, to broaden their horizons and pursue their personal dreams? I know not one domestic animal that is so interested. Do you? Yet, Black folks, you have built a nation with your wit, grit, and determination. Black folks, know this. The Constitution was not written for you, but know this also. It was not written for poor white folks either. It was written only for that 1/8 of powerful, rich landowners, white men. Black folks, we have overcome that stumbling block. Black folks know this. We are making the nation live up to its constitutional dictates of building a more perfect union and having thereby given more human rights to all the people in the nation and overcoming another stumbling block. Black folks know this. In your black skin, against all the trials, tribulations, and Herculean tasks set before you, you have accomplished much. The heavens above proclaim to you, Black folks, well done. And now you take your well-deserved place among those who have done much to enlighten and improve the human race. Black folks. Seeking. Every now and then in my seeking, along this long, tortuous, and sometimes dark journey up the mountainside to the summit, I tire, become weary, feel desolation and dread, and in a state of seeming emptiness, I wander always forward in this darkness, sometimes veering drunkenly off the path into dry and arid deserts, still seeking after thee, thirstily. Black is me. We don't seem to mind being called colored people, Negroes, African Americans, or even the N-word. But we'll be damned before we be called black. Why? Because for centuries we have allowed the rich, the powerful, and mean-spirited to use our blackness as something to be feared, something negative, something to make use of. Blackness seen as something dirty, something less than. Only a force full of evil and jealousy could use the color of one's skin for its own wicked purposes. And then to have the audacity, the temerity, and the wild childish insanity in trying to determine how high one stands on the scale of evolution according to their color. Now let us look at ourselves as the powerful energy that we are, inherent with the strength, courage, perseverance, and endurance of the blackness that we are. During the 60s and 70s, we shouted out that black is beautiful, but rolled right on with, I am Afro-American. I am anything but black. I say to you that your black faces are as beautiful as faces of any other color. After all, the only real white folks are born from black and pale faces and call themselves black. There are some real black folks in the world, but the folks we call white are what the red men called them when they landed on these shores, pale faces. In spite of my mixed heritage in America, I am proud to say, black is me.
My name is Carolyn Dahl, and I'm happy to share a few poems with you today. I'm going to be reading from my new chapbook, A Muddy Kind of Love. And the first poem I would say is kind of like a question that many of us face. Picking a husband. She considers a red-haired man because she wants something odd in a man's handsome. He would be her second choice. Her first love was an albino with skin like pear blossoms threaded with faint blue pulses. His body a lovely map in which she longed to be lost. In bright light, she could see his beating heart pump raspberry juice to his eyes, fringed in lashes white as slivers of alabaster. Who couldn't love a pink-eyed man? She wasn't sure if he were made of cream or clouds, or if in a blizzard he would disappear, edges fading like milk on snow, or if their baby would be unicorns, or white baby deer, like the fawn she found trembling in the meadow under the lilac. that seated itself. It was no bigger than a dainty white melon, and its nose and hooves blushed pink as roses. Who couldn't love a baby with pink toes? She would have taken it home, fed its tiny mouth pudding, kept it in a blue room, hidden from the circus men who would place it in a white room next to the albino man she loves but cannot free. Sometimes you must leave behind what is fully divine and settle for what has a little bit of divine. So she bought a gray rabbit with pink eyes and married the red-haired man. Who couldn't love a man whose eyelashes were almost albino white? Usually my poems begin with maybe a fragment of truth, and then I fictionalize them. But this poem that I'm going to read next actually is a family story. I suppose you would call it a family myth. And it's probably as true as possibly any memory could be. One day, while making bread in the kitchen, she thought about names for her coming child, names long enough to sing like a hymn, names with syllables like a prayer. When she reached into the bag of flour, a lump flew out, a tiny ghost or a mouse covered in flour dust, which hit her belly with a force stronger than its size. The fleeing mouse scurried over her body, its nails pricking skin. As it neared her face, she saw the points of whiskers, its sharp teeth, and in its wide eyes, her own startled face before she fainted, knowing there would be a price for her fright. When her baby was born, she named him Theodore, a name that took time to say, long enough to lift his shirt and point to the large birthmark, mouse-shaped, long-tailed, velvety to the touch. And if you stayed for coffee, she would tell you how, a week after Theodore's birth, in the back of her cellar, she found 3 baby mice, all white as flour. Now I'm going to switch to my other chapbook, which is Art Preserves What Can't Be Saved. And usually I choose a lot of poems that I feel the audience might like or the group, but every poet has favorites. And once in a while, even though I like all my poems, there are certain ones that are favorites that I like to read. And this is one called Art Preserves What Can't Be Saved, and it's the title poem in this book. And it's an ekphrastic poem, which means that it is written inspired by an artwork. And in this case, it's Thomas Gainsborough's coastal scene with shipping and cattle. And you can see that at the Fine Arts Museum in Houston. But what it did for me, in the cattle, there's a brown cow, and it reminded me of my pet cow. And so standing in front of this painting and my memories started to twine together. Art preserves what can't be saved. One cow separates herself from the herd, stretches her neck. Too far if you grew up hugging cows. She stands on a cliff, which our timid, clumsy animals would never do, and points her horns toward incoming ships. This is a fictional cow, artifice from a painter's brush, yet the way she lifts her head, smells the sea air, seems real, as if she thinks she's come to the end of fences, senses a reward of salt. One's eye sailed away on the broad back of a pet cow, brown as this one, We were unpardable shadows, inventing our shapes in the summer creek, splashing through ripples of tadpoles, pushing against the current, believing we were going somewhere, but eventually flowing back home, happy and wet as the newly hatched frogs singing from the tip of her dripping tail. Under the museum lights, the cow vanishes in the glare of varnish, as if its thinly painted body needed to escape from the tensity of our eyes. My cow never returned from the dark barn a prophet. How I missed the weight of her on our land. I thought she would always be there, like a childhood dress I imagine I can still wear. I left the calm mythology of farms, never expected to see her again, safe in a gold frame. Other people pass by quickly. It's only a painting of a cow in clouds, nothing they need to reclaim. I should move on too. The guard is growing uneasy. He doesn't know. This is my memory pinned to the wall, that I am riding the warm back of a sweet cow, coaxing her down the dangerous cliff to the edge of the painting where we jump the frame's fence. And the last poem that I'm going to read. At a certain point, I think in our lives, we begin to notice that things are disappearing. It may be things that we grew up with, customs, objects, things we used to eat. And then suddenly at some point, we discover that also our parents have disappeared. And then often we lose our family land. So we no longer have a place to return to that is the soil of our childhood, the soil in which we grew. But sometimes within that, there is something very beautiful because something will have stayed that has not disappeared. And this thing, whenever we see it or whenever we touch it, gives us comfort. And it reminds us of so many memories because let's face it, memories are the only place we can keep all our beloved things. Her grapes. The grapes don't know. They are the only song still singing. Summer flowers fell silent, numb by frost. The bats, twins of birds, have tucked their sopranos into fur, strung the vacant house with curls of toes, folded their skin wings against winter. So much lost. Breath, made only of air, cannot support the heavy words the child needs to say. The grapes carry the weight. Clustered burdens clinging to rotting fences, brown tendrils waving through early snow, like antennae listening for her slow coming. The daughter picks a fat grape, rolls it in her mouth, last taste of family vines. She swallows the sweet flesh, but the skin sticks to her tongue. What to do with this bitterness? Spit it to the ground or chew the shell of useless abundance? Grief is the shadow she drags through the red light of her body. Her mother's days became too fragile to repeat. How many years could she pour summer into glass jars? In the cellar, she finds last year's jelly, takes it home to spread the quivering purple on bread. Feed the sorrow, her mother would have said. Just as the grapes will feed next year's bird song, just as the bats will stretch in the attic, fly directionless into another spring. Thank you for listening.
What happens when the drum is scarred and fragile and tired of jazz percussion? Young hearts filled with milagro charms pound with love and passion. Like the Virgin of the Guadalupe, fires flare from chest chalices, but aged smoke rises from cardiac cauldrons, sparked from machines in chest muscle blankets, 60 beats per minute, ready to shock the zombie heart. And the wires push the magic out. Love lingers in ancient patina and thrives in hearts of steel.